Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers Podcast. I am your host, Jody Grunwald. It is not often you meet someone who has met and spent time with the likes of David Bowie, Christina Aguilera, and the list goes on and on. Nick Cucci started his career working for college radio in New Jersey. In this episode, you will hear how Nick went from local college radio to being the senior executive director for the New York chapter of the Recording Academy. Now, the Recording Academy does so much for the music industry. The one thing you may recognize is that the Recording Academy produces the Grammy Awards. Nick understands and has seen firsthand the impact that music has on all of our lives. It helps people through difficult times, we listen to it to celebrate milestones, and it is part of our everyday life. Nick has spent his career helping those whose passion and love of music get their voices and instruments heard by the masses. This story truly is one that proves you really have no idea where your path will lead you and who you will meet along the way. What I loved most about this interview is that you can truly hear how much Nick loves the work he does. It's not just a job or a career. Music is embedded in his soul. Please take a moment to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. Also, we would love it if you would subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel. It helps our guests get their voices heard. And at this time, I'm so excited to share that this podcast has been heard in 71 countries/territories and 822 cities around the globe. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers Podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and as I say every week, I get to interview the changemakers, the inspirers, and those who are just disrupting the status quo in the best way possible. And today, I'm super excited because I get to interview somebody who I've wanted to interview for quite some time now, Nick Cucci. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Jody. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, no, I'm so thrilled to have you, and we finally can make this happen. It took a little time, so thank you for being here. You are the Senior Executive Director for the Recording Academy New York chapter, but for those who may not understand, what would you say? I know you told me before we started. What would you say the name of your organization otherwise would be?
Well, the name of the organization is the Recording Academy, but everybody knows us as the Grammys. So the Grammy, of course, is the trophy. It's the award that people get, and therefore the telecast every February, whatever. But the name of the organization is the Recording Academy. So,
Right. And I think, like you said before to me, before the show here, that a lot of people don't realize that they pay attention to the actual award.
Exactly. It depending on who you speak to, they know what the Recording Academy is, and if they don't, then everybody knows what the Grammy is. So it's one of those big global iconic, icons, if you will. Yeah.
Which I love because Changemakers is about global. And I love this, but I'm going to read just a little bit from your bio, which
Sure.
when I read your bio, I was like, this is amazing. Nick has more than 40 years experience in the music industry. Besides holding senior positions at Rough Trade Records, Columbia Records, RCA Records, and MTV, he was instrumental in creating and implementing marketing campaigns for, listen to this, Christina Aguilera, David Bowie, Jessica Simpson, Dixie Chicks, Soul Asylum, Connick Jr., Kate Bush, Kiss, The Pixies, Lucinda Williams, Coheed and Cambria, The Offspring, and many more. I had to list them out because it's so incredible. And it also goes on to say that during your career, you've worked side by side with some of the most powerful and influential executives and artists in the industry. And before joining the Recording Academy's New York chapter, you were the executive director of Lightbeat Music, Fight HIV/AIDS, a nationally prominent nonprofit organization. And you're now in your 10th year at the Recording Academy. How incredible, Mike.
It's exhausting just listening.
Oh, and so exciting for our listeners and for everyone. And we're going to get into all the wonderful work that you're doing now. But before we get to today, I always like to go a little backwards with my my guests because it took us a while to get here, right? It didn't happen overnight.
No.
So tell us about young Nick, where you grew up, what kind of childhood you had.
Sure. So I was born in what at one time was a little town called Beacon, New York, which now has, over the last, I guess, 10, 15 years, has really kind of erupted into a very big, almost northern hipsters suburban center from New York, because there's a direct train line into Grand Central. There's a huge art exhibit museum there, craft breweries, all that stuff that attract that crowd. And we go back there all the time. But when I was about two, we moved to the Bronx, right? And I had a fairly normal childhood. I have two brothers that are both younger than me. One is 2 years younger and the other is 8 years younger. And I went to St. Mary's Elementary School in the Bronx. And I went there K through 8. And then I went to an all boys Catholic high school called Salesian High School, which is in New Rochelle. And by now we're in the mid 70s. And as you may be aware, just historically, the 70s in New York City was a disaster. Financially, socially, economically, the mayors were closing police stations. They were closing fire departments. And the city at the time had asked Gerald Ford, who was the president at the time, for $500 million, a $500 million loan. And I'll never forget that the New York Post had this gigantic headline about that. And I can't really say what it said, but the New York Post. And in that 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, there was a great exodus out of the Bronx and a lot of the cities, and some went to Long Island and some went to North Jersey. And we went to North Jersey. So here I am, a kid with a thick Bronx accent, going from an all boys Catholic high school, very strict, as you can imagine, to Northern New Jersey and a very large regional high school. And now there are girls in class because there weren't for 2 years. And now I'm 16 and it's a whole different thing. So, and by this time, my younger brother was born. We moved to Fairfield, New Jersey. I went to West Essex High School, which, if you're a fan of The Sopranos, that's the school that Meadow went to. And that cafeteria scene where she's with her best friends, oh, I'm never going to go to Berkeley. I'm going to end up going to Glassboro State College. That was my cafeteria, and I went to Glassboro State College. Obviously, it's called Rowan now. You live in Jersey too, so But I went from West Essex to Glassboro State College. But I right after high school, I did a year at Montclair State my freshman year, and then I transferred to Glassboro. But all through this time, I spent my summers at the Jersey Shore because my grandfather bought a house in a town that was literally dug out of the swamps called Mystic Islands. It's by Tuckerton, which is one of the more well-known towns just north of Atlantic City. And he saw the house in 1958 on the Atlantic City boardwalk. They had model homes on the boardwalk. Bought it, and I spent 22 summers there. And so I was that kid that the day after school ended, we left and didn't come back until the day before school started. So I didn't grow up in the summer in the city. And I think that certainly had, I like to think, a positive effect, because who knows, idle hands, right? When you're kids, you got nothing to do, hot, sweltering summer. So, but all of that time, the big thing that was, in my life, besides playing Little League or playing CYO basketball or whatever it was, were the two great loves of my life, besides my family, of course, is music and books. And once I kind of got that hook with music, and it started probably in 72, 73. So I'm 12, 13 years old, right? And I remember hearing, not like Rock the Boat by the Hughes Corporation, which of course I heard and loved, but when you heard something like David Bowie's Space Oddity, and remember hearing that song for the first time and thinking, this is not a normal pop song, whatever normal might be, and normal's probably not even the right word. there was something about that song that didn't sound like every other song that was on WABC, because that was, radio then, there was not as tightly formatted as it was now, wasn't owned by conglomerates. It was all locally programmed, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just kind of hooked. And I was particularly hooked on British music, which I still am. And it went from David Bowie to things like T-Rex, Slade, Queen, of course, Led Zeppelin, uh, and then even like the more progressive bands like Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, stuff like that. So I was entrenched in that. There used to be magazines. Um, it's obviously this is the mid 70s. There's no such thing as the internet or anything of the sort.
Right.
Music magazines were gigantic. So, Rolling Stone, et cetera, of course, but there were two big magazines. One was called Circus and one was called Circus Raves. Came out every 2 weeks. There was one of them, and they all came with a poster. And my whole bedroom wall we had bunk beds. So mine was the top bunk, was all Jethro Tull and Led Zeppelin and whatever posters came with the magazine. And I read them religiously. I wasn't like that kid. I was still too young to like my life changed when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Like, I mean, I remember seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, but it's not like this. It wasn't until I literally heard Space Oddity by David Bowie. So, and then when I went to high school, I was now, especially at Salesian, some of the friends that I was in got connected with were really into music. And I did the same thing. I played basketball. I was on the swim team. I intramural stuff, whatever. We moved to Jersey, and this was another big change because now I'm exposed to people who are listening to, I suppose, what was called a softer rock. Like, remember there was like AOR and MOR, right? Album oriented rock, middle of the road rock, whatever. So now it's like Outlaws, Pure Prairie League, things like that. And then not my cup of tea, like CSNY, stuff like that. Not my cup of tea, but I didn't hate it. I like rock, more rockier stuff. And then I went to college, and especially when I went to Glassboro, I decided that I wanted to be a DJ. So that was that. And it was like, so I was on WGLS, which still exists, the college radio station. And now I had gone through all of that sort of rock and progressive rock and all of that kind of stuff and just absorbed it all. But now there was this thing called punk rock. And that was the other sort of 180 change for me, where I just dove into that, seeing bands like the Dead Boys and the Ramones and the Talking Heads, early on. And Glassboro was close enough to Philadelphia. I could see those bands and in those rooms in Philly. So I was on the radio station, and I knew I really couldn't be a DJ. First, you don't go to college to be a DJ. Like, what did I know? I didn't know that there was like this whole industry behind what I was listening to. And few people do. It's really, that it's just such this big, gigantic mess behind everything that puts this music, and puts it in whatever digestible form it is, whether it's album or CDs or digital downloads or streaming. Somebody is doing that after the artist makes it and delivers it, right? So I'm on the radio, and this was another major turning point. In Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which not far from Glassboro, there was a short-lived club that was run by a guy named Steven Starr, who's now a big-time restaurateur in Philadelphia, I believe. And it was booked and managed by a guy named Greg Benedetti, who I'm still friends with. I get this call one night. I had Monday nights from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I'm playing all of these bands, right? From the Talking Heads to British stuff too. Now this is 77, 78 and 79. And I am playing Gang of Four in the Fall and, Theater of Hate and all of these very aggro post-punk British bands. And that is my sweet spot. Late 70s, early 80s, post-punk British bands, that's my sweet spot. Cocteau Twins, Gang of Four, all that stuff. I get this call and I answered, hello, WGLS. And it's this guy, Greg Benedetti. He's like, Nick, I got this new club. And would you be interested in giving away tickets and interviewing the singer for the band? And I'm like, what? I had no idea that this kind of stuff happened. And I'm like, so who's the band? And he's like, the Psychedelic Furs. Now, that was huge because I was playing the Psychedelic Furs first record incessantly, and I loved it. So that happened. And so I had this relationship with Greg, and I went to that club all the time because now I learned the greatest perk of the music business is called the guest list. So I'm on the guest list all the time. I don't have to buy tickets, which I probably couldn't afford anyway, right? Even though they were, $10, $15, $25, whatever it was.
Right.
I mean, I saw Led Zeppelin in 1977 at Madison Square Garden for $18. Compared to, could you imagine what a Led Zeppelin ticket would be now if they were together? So and then there was a club in Philadelphia called the Hot Club, which was the Philadelphia's punk rock club, and did some work with them similarly. But then I did, tell me if I'm going on too long or going too much into the details.
No. Let's spend a few more minutes on this because this is very interesting. Because
okay.
your progression into where you are today. I mean, I think it's so great for listeners to hear where you start is definitely not where you wind up.
No, certainly not. So anyway, I do my internship because I'm a communications major, which you may or may not know in the late 70s was like the major du jour, right? After Marshall McLuhan's The Medium is the Message, which is the book everybody had to read. And you had to pick like a track. You could do creative writing, you could do advertising, you could do PR. I did TV, radio, TV, film. So I did my internship at KYW in Philadelphia, and I worked on this show called The Rock and Roll Show, which was produced by a big radio guy in Philly. It was a TV show monthly named Denny Somack, who was my first boss, hosted by a famous Philly DJ named Cindy Drew, who's still on, I think, WMGK or something like that in Philly. We're still friends all these years later. And I did my internship, and then they hired me. So I went to work for Denny Somack Production. I was a PA and carried equipment, and I interviewed bands, and I transcribed tapes and all of that, blah, 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 blah. But I moved from Glassboro now to Center City, Philadelphia, which is like my own apartment, which couldn't have been more exciting that I did not have a roommate. So, but that job lasted 2 years. So that was 82, 84. And I could not tell you how important those 2 years for me. Those 2 years literally shaped the person that I am now. Working, I had my job, but I also DJ'd on the side. I wrote for multiple fanzines on all the bands. I saw literally 2 shows a week, which believe it or not, I still see two or three concerts a week. But the job went away. But I always knew I was getting back to New York as much as I loved Philadelphia, and still do. Moved back, my parents' house, New Jersey, got a job doing college radio promotions. Now, this is 82, 84. College radio was the entry point for so many people in the music business. And I called college radio stations. My brothers would know colleges by their football teams. I knew them by their call letters, right? So, and that was really my first job in the, let's say, record business rather than the music business, even though when I worked with Denny, we did long and short form radio syndicated programs. So it was definitely music, but not record, right? Now I'm working in the record business. So I did that job for about a year and a half. And then it was like an independent company that record companies hired to call for you to call college radio stations. So I got this job, and one of the records I worked was a really credible, important, influential artist that really soared at college radio. His name is Robin Hitchcock. And we had a record. There was a record on Relativity Records called Element of Light, and that album went to #1 on the CMJ, which was the college radio journal, radio rag, whatever they called it. And the CMJ Top 200, which was a big deal. Robin Hitchcock's #1. So then Relativity Records hired me. So I left the independent thing, and now I have my first job at a record label, and this is like 85, 86. And I'm still calling college radio, but the Relativity Records, which then was owned by something called Important Record Distributors, I am living now in Long Island City, which is not the Long Island City it is now, which is like nice hotels and blah, blah, blah. Then it was not. But I have my own apartment because I don't want roommates, but I have 2 jobs. So I also work at a record store downtown at night and on weekends because I didn't want roommates. That was the key. Relativity is trying to expand its number of releases, but what it didn't have was anybody to sort of oversee the release from the time that the artist delivers the master to the time that the record is in trucks, finished product, right? And that job, which I came to know many years later, was called a product manager. And I was doing that job because it needed to be done. And independent labels, you don't have gigantic staff, right? Everybody does a lot of different things. And you had to do like, okay, where do we want to advertise this record or that kind of thing? And that's marketing, right? So I started doing all of that. And then it is now 1987. And we put out a band, which is still my favorite band of all time, called Cocteau Twins. And they're from Grangemouth, Scotland. And we put out a compilation record of theirs, which was basically their live set called The Pink Opaque. And I became really good friends with the gentleman who ran their UK label called 4AD. His name was Ivo Watts Russell. Today, one of the treasure the memories of working with him. And got really close, saw the band, friendly with the band. The first time I went to London, I stayed with them, like that kind of thing. And then another really important British label called Rough Trade was looking to expand in America. And they were looking for a label manager, like a general manager. And Ivo recommended me to the guy who was going to be the CEO of Rough Trade in America. His name is Robin Hurley. I'm still dear friends with him. And I get the job. And all of a sudden now, like, I'm a boss. I have an assistant, and I have a publicist and a radio person and a salesperson, and it's like, holy crap. So it was really great. And we worked with the most amazing bands, the Pixies and Mazzy Star and Butthole Surfers and Lucinda Williams and so many bands. And it was so great. And for me, it was also really important to learn then everything about a record label and a distributor and how to deal with launching a record to the world. Was the band, the artist delivers it to you with all the hopes in the world that you're going to take care of their baby to the best of your ability, right? So it was really important to learn that. And so I was there for 4 years at Rough Trade, and I loved every second of it. And then I went, this was now 91. And I'm married. I have a child, living in Williamsburg, which is not Williamsburg, back then.
Today.
Yeah, right. And the major labels, now college radio and American independent record labels and British independent record labels are really burgeoning because of music magazines, because of college radio. Bands like REM achieved global status because of college radio support in the early days. So the major labels are coming in and poaching all of these bigger bands, REM, whoever it might have been. And we had a band called the Pixies, which was on Rough Trade. On 4AD, we licensed it in America. Their second album got picked up by Elektra. So the majors are really starting to poaching, but they're also now poaching people, meaning we're going to sign these bands. We need to hire someone that knows how to work these bands, because it's a different marketing plan that you would do for a band like the Pixies than you would for an artist like Michael Bolton, say. And
Right.
I have done marketing plans for Michael Bolton too, because I was his product manager. So in 1991, I got hired by Columbia Records. So now I go from one of the most credible indie labels in the world to the biggest record label in the world. And I went there and I had a chip because I, thought I was cooler than everybody else there, because I came from Rough Trade and I knew who the Pixies were and they didn't. I still kind of carry that chip around sometimes, unfortunately, even at my age. So I get this job at Columbia and I'm associate director of marketing. And now I'm doing real marketing plans with real budgets. And that was a really big thing for me. So I was at Columbia Records then for 13 years. And I worked with bands like Soul Asylum and Kate Bush and Ned's Atomic Dustbin and Manic Street Preachers and Harry Connick and Michael Bolton, as I mentioned. And then in 98, I got lured away to go work at RCA as vice president of marketing. And that's when I was working with Christina. And that was eye-opening because I had never worked with a record that took off meteorically with a song called Genie in a Bottle, which I'm sure you remember.
Yeah,
and that first record sold like 10 million copies. And I hadn't really worked with, I've worked with plenty of talented people before that. Kate Bush, such a vanguard of an artist. But here's this tiny little 88-pound, 17-year-old girl who could sing pretty much better than everybody in the world, in the pop sphere. I'm not saying she was an opera singer or anything like that.
Right.
And it was just so eye-opening working with that and working with hair and makeup in every city that she went to, and choreography and dancers and the right dance captain and $1 million videos. And it was insane.
So I want to ask you something on this,
Yeah.
because I think when when we talk about, oh, I work with so-and-so, right, in the professional world of, the everyday conference room, it's very different than when you say you're working with this artist. So what do you mean when you say you're working with them? Give us kind of like, what was the day in the life for you working with Christina?
Right. So Christina in particular, just because, we had high hopes for the success of her as an artist and for record sales. Again, this is before digital downloads, because this is 98, 99, and iTunes doesn't launch until 2001, right? So now the record, what we did. So what you do as a marketing person, right? So let's go back a little. I'm getting ahead of myself. When you're assigned an artist, right, as a marketing person, you are, say, the hub of the wheel, right? That you have the bird's eye view of the project. You don't put together the publicity plan or the radio plan, but you work with those departments and the sales plan and the video, and that all together, besides what you do on a marketing front, whether you're doing something with, say, a big retailer like Sears or a CPG like Coca-Cola or something like that, right? So you're working with all of that stuff together gets put in the blender, and that becomes the marketing plan. And you, as the product manager, make sure that everybody does their job according to the budget that has been set, because that's the other thing, right? And you got to stick to the budget until there's a reason not to stick to the budget. And the reason not to stick to the budget is her album debuts at #1. And now all of a sudden you can't make these CDs fast enough. So you that's the kind of thing you do. You work with all the departments, you work very closely with the artist and the management team, because again, it's not my vision, it's not the record label's vision, it's that artist's vision. And every artist deserves to have their vision put forward. It's their soul, it's their blood, it's their baby that you're putting out in the world. And altruistically, that sounds great. Obviously, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of compromise, and you work on that, and you hope that you get into a position as the marketing person that you're a trusted voice, right? That they know you have their best interest at heart, even though you work and get paid by the record label, right? So with Christina, it was always, and this was at a time of Britney Spears and Mandy Moore and that kind of thing, right? So the thing that separated her from everybody else was her voice, because no one can sing like her, and probably still she's up among that echelon of the top 5 great women vocalists of our time. And what we decided to do was do these showcases, high-end showcases in major cities, LA, Las Vegas, New York, obviously. We did one in London, we did one in Toronto, and it was just her and a piano player. So there's no hiding that voice. And she's this big, I mean, and under a lot of pressure being 18 years old, like to do this, right? And it was spectacular. It cost a fortune to do that because we wanted raw bars and a cocktail bar and martinis and all of that. But I worked, it was there were 18-hour days, 20-hour days,
Sure.
Kind of thing. And you got to go to all of those things, and you got to make sure that she's in the right frame of mind, because when you're only doing 3 songs and we did one just for the MTV executives, you can't mess that up, because that's it, and of course she knocked it out of the park every single time. There's no one, and her natural dance ability was, and her athleticism, she was so innately talented. It was unbelievable. It was definitely one of the greatest experiences of my life. And I still, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that was going to lead me to my next question is, who is that person? And it may be, there's so many, it may be hard for you to choose, but just that moment, I'm sure you've had many of them that has just touched you, right? Because it sounds like she, her voice and just her youth and that connect, and seeing her connected and doing what she loves, that was, you pointed her out specifically. And I'm sure you have tons of other artists who have done things, but is there someone along that way or along the way, all the way till now, that's really been that person or an artist that has really done something and hit you in a certain way?
Sure. David Bowie. I had the very good fortune of working with him for 2 records when I was at Columbia. So I went from Columbia 1991 to 1998, then to RCA from 1998 to 2001, then back to Columbia from 2001 to 2006. And David Bowie had put out a record called Heathen, which was the sort of first kind of comeback record, and back together with his producer named Tony Visconti, who was, one of had done over the course of the years 16 David Bowie records. And that was a really good record. I didn't work on that record, but I worked on the next one called Reality, and then the live record that came out after that. And he had always been my idol, because you remember from the beginning of my story, listening to and first hearing Space Oddity. And now I'm in a room with this man. And, I have very few pictures of me with any of my artists that I've ever worked with. I just never thought it was a thing. But I realized that the one that I should have, because obviously he's not with us anymore, was one with him. So anyway, he's always been one of my favorite artists, and I tend to follow and really like artists that are really like on that like vanguard, like Kate Bush and David, obviously, artists currently now like St. Vincent or something like that are really stretching the boundaries of production and technology and songwriting and performance and things like that. And Kate obviously was very chameleon, like I was her product manager and again, you meet these people and you're like, you have to maintain your cool, right? Because
Yeah.
even though you're a fan, you're like, oh, you're Kate Bush. It's kind of hard. But it's been great. And, and there's still plenty of artists that kind of, move me now. When, St. Vincent is certainly one. And I just saw her on the other night in Brooklyn at Brooklyn Paramount, and she was unbelievable. But I always kind of look for that. I mean, I love so much different kinds of music, but it's really that kind of vanguard artist that I really like. Kind of, I hear it and they become part of you, because you appreciate the stretch and the bravery that they're putting into everything that they do. And listen, everybody that's an artist has to be brave, because again, you're making this record, you're bearing your soul, and you hope that the world accepts it. So every artist is brave. I don't want to diminish anybody's work, but there's Anyway,
no,
so you know what I mean.
I was going to say, well, look at you, right? You started to be a DJ in a college. And you're working for and I want to get into Grammy because that's really important.
Okay.
The Recording Academy, I really want to get into that. But before we get into that, I have one question I think is important, because I want people who are listening to understand you were the DJ at what's now Rowan University's, radio station.
Right.
And now you are the senior executive director for the Recording Academy. And along the way, and all the people you've worked with, and although, I don't get starstruck, I think that these people are incredible humans who are truly super brave to share their craft and their creativity with the rest of the world.
Agreed.
I don't view them as different than all of us. We all have blood coursing through our veins, and we all have feelings and thoughts and anxieties to all of that, and imposter syndrome. I'm sure many have it. We all do. But what do you tell that person, that kid right now, sitting in that radio station, or anybody who's thinking, I'm never going to get to the space I want to get to because it seems so far away? You have such a great story. What advice do you give to that person?
Oh boy, it's funny because we have, the Recording Academy is a membership organization, right? We have voting members that vote on the Grammy Awards. We have professional members that are in the industry, like, yourself. And then we have Grammy U, we have college level membership. And I mentor college students that are Grammy U members every year. And I think the thing that I honestly say to them is that the two things that you need to know, the two most important things are: know everything that you can about what you're doing or what you want to do. Because if you're ever in a room where there's a person that you want to work for or mentor you or emulate, you want to know what they do. What you want to have enough knowledge that you ask good questions, and then honestly and truly, like, just never give up. Because, and I know that sounds trite, and I'll give you an example. In 2006, I got let go from Columbia Records, right? So in the early 2000s, the streaming services were starting to build. Spotify, then Apple came online and others. Because the digital downloads were not dollar for dollar replacing the sales from CDs that no longer were happening in the same volume that they were in the 90s. So the record labels not the way they are now, but the way they were in 05, 06, 07, were hurting, and they were jettisoned staff. So I now have 2 children, a house in the suburbs, a big mortgage, and a holy crap. And I did anything and everything, any job that I could get to not lose my house, to have to move or take my kids out of their school or whatever it might be, right? I did everything. And I'm also now older, like way older. The music business is a young person's business, because it's a trendy business. And the youth bring the trends. They understand the trends. They grow up with the trends. By the time you're 40s, 50s, 60s, you're not that person anymore, but I never gave up even then. So, certainly some struggling, dark financial years, but then one day, and I had a job at Lifebeat, and that was a really great experience too, running a nonprofit. It was February of 2015. It was the week after that Grammy telecast. And then a headhunter calls me about this job. And that was 10 years ago. And it was just one of those things that, you never lost sight of what was important. And never, honestly, you have to, fight for it. I know that sounds trivial. And even when I say it, I feel that, but it's not, knowing what you're doing, especially if you're an artist. If you're an artist, you have to look at it 2 different aspects. One is your artistry, right? Your songwriting, the music that you're making, the people that you're working with, from the other songwriters or the band or the producer or whatever your record is shaping up to be like, the team that you're putting together. All of that's really important. The other aspect of it is it's a business. It's called the music business, right? You're an artist. Everything generates from you. All of the money that's circulating, the billions in the music business, starts with the record that's made and delivered, right? And some of them have huge impacts, whether it's Beyonce or Taylor, or this summer it's been Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter, and The Last Dinner Party. These artists that are just breaking through globally, and I'm sure they never expected it. And it's like, right? But the money that's generated is just unbelievable. But it's a business. And if you're a young artist, you need to know how to navigate that business. You need to be able to trust the people that you have on your team, whether it's a manager or a publicist or an attorney. You need to know that your songs are copyrighted and protected. You need to know where your revenue streams are coming from. It is so important that artist knows that. It's not just like it doesn't happen anymore where the only artists that people know about are on major labels, and therefore all of that stuff is taken care of. It's not the way it is now. Anybody can put up a record on Spotify through a TuneCore or CD Baby or The Orchard or any of those aggregators like that. You can make a record. We can make a record right now, you and I, on our laptop. Maybe only you and I are going to listen to it, but we could we could make it, we could release it, and once you release it and it's up on all the streaming services, that's a flat playing field. You're in the same spot where great rock bands are, like Coheed and Cambria, or like, where Beyonce is. You're there now.
It's crazy.
Now you have to market it. Now
that's the hard part.
People have to now go and find it. So, so you have to really look at it that you're an artist, but you also are an LLC. You have to really know the business. And we've heard horror stories of, whether it's Billy Joel or Leonard Cohen or any of the, the kind of legacy acts where managers and attorneys and labels rip them off. And it was very much, maybe much more innocent time, whatever, but it can't be like that anymore. It can't. There's too much information at your fingertips to learn everything about the business if you're an artist, to protect your art.
So let's talk about what a senior executive director of the Recording Academy of New York chapter does, and a little bit more info on so that people understand, what is the Recording Academy?
Okay. All right. So let's start with that. So the Recording Academy is a membership organization that protects the rights of music creators, essentially. We do not represent record labels, publishers, PROs. We represent the music creator, right? So we are an advocate and an ally, and we one day of year give away this big, gigantic gold trophy that everybody loves and wants. And we do through the various divisions of our company help the music industry. So we have advocacy efforts that work with government, both federal, state, and local, to pass music legislation to protect the rights, revenue, whatever it might be, of the music creator. And that, if that legislation, like the biggest thing we probably are most known for is the Music Modernization Act, which happened about a couple of years ago, that when Trump was president, he signed into law. So we have advocacy. We have our charitable organization, which is called Music Cares, that is the safety net, if you will, of the music industry, where we take care of the people making music, but also the music industry. Everything from the tour bus driver to the studio manager to the publicist to the artists themselves. We offer things like dental clinics, hearing clinics, medical clinics, tax and visa work, mental health, AIDS awareness and recovery, addiction recovery, financial support, whatever it might be. And then we do lots of work with schools. As I mentioned, we have the Grammy U program. We do a lot of work with a program called Grammy Museum, which is called Grammy in the Schools, which is through the Grammy Museum. And I run the New York chapter. We have 12 chapters, right? New York is the second largest from a membership organization. Los Angeles is the biggest from a strictly numbers standpoint. And my job every day is kind of based on where we are in the calendar. Let's say, like right now, we're going into October, right? So in the summer, we have something called OEP, which is online entry process, where record labels and members of the Academy submit their music for awards consideration. And that's a big number. And because on in early October, I think it's the 4th, voting opens. So you have to be a voting member of the Academy, which is a music creator. You have to have a certain number of credits in order to become a voting member. And the first ballot goes out, and that's in October, and you vote on it. And then the nominations are announced on November 8th. And then there's the final ballot, and then the guy with the suitcase down the red carpet and all that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what we're involved in right now is awards. And we also, our membership cycle, we have a once a year deadline to apply for membership. And at the end of June is when the members that join that year are invited to join. So I have an onslaught of hundreds of new members for the New York chapter. And also we're past Labor Day now. So now my programming year kicks in. So all of the stuff that we do for our members from a programming side, we had one just last night on maximizing your revenue stream, which again is a very big topic. We'll do something this year on AI or Atmos. We'll do stuff that is genre specific. So we're going to do something at the Harlem Jazz Museum with because they have salsa exhibit there, and coming up is the Hispanic Heritage Month. So we're going to do just a kind of a program up there. So it depends. So we're always doing stuff like that. Last fiscal year, we did more than 30 programs in the New York chapter. And I think it's kind of a little unsustainable to keep going at that pace, but we'll do 25, I'm sure, because things just happen, and then we also have boards, right? So every chapter that I mentioned has a board of governors that are elected by that chapter's membership from its membership. And they're an advisory board, so I don't report to them. But we work very closely together on all of that stuff that I just mentioned. So, it really depends on when it is. We have a big event in January called our nominee celebration, which we're already planning for because we have to find a venue and raise sponsorship dollars and all of that. So that's going on while all of this is happening too. And then October 1st is our big advocacy day nationally called Music Advocacy Day. And that's when congressional leadership is in their home offices, and we set up meetings throughout the country for our members to visit their local elected leader to talk about whatever pieces of legislation we're pushing, that year. And we usually have about over 2,000 members that participate in that, probably 400 to 450 meetings nationally that happen on that one day. And it's senators, congressional leaders, whoever, House and Senate. So yeah, there's a lot.
It's a lot more than people think it is, right? It's not just the award shows up and
Yeah.
you don't just end when the awards are over. So it's an ongoing, and I know what it's like to put together events, that's for sure. And
Sure,
they are
yeah.
an undertaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm excited to, through because I am the CEO of Applaud Our Kids Foundation, to be able to apply and see what happens to be a member too, which is really
Yes.
super exciting.
Yes.
So I appreciate that very much. Giving me that application.
Yeah.
But so I think most people understand that the night of the awards, I'm sure it's a larger than life experience. And anything you want to share about that night? Because I know listeners are going to want to know, what it feels like to be in that room.
Well, first, it's a live television show, right? So being in that room, there are certainly moments when nothing is happening because the CBS is on a commercial break, right?
Yes.
So, and I always like to say that, that night is, not about me. It's not about the staff. It's about these artists that we're celebrating. It's just, it's so exciting because, you don't know who's going to win. And I always love when it's a surprise, like it's not the hands down favorite. I always root for the underdog, I'm happy for everyone. I mean, even being a nominee is certainly a life-changing moment. I look forward to the performances, some of the performances that I remember even before I worked at the Academy. Listen, Christina won Best New Artist that year, and I'll never forget being in those stands and rushing backstage to see her. It was unbelievable. It's one of those things that I actually knew I had something to do with that. As small as I might have had, but I was involved in that team, right? So, I look forward to that. We give away 94, 96 awards. About a dozen are on the telecast. And then the others are given away at an afternoon ceremony called the premiere ceremony, which is streamed on Grammy.com, but not televised. And, like the big awards are on TV, the album of the year and the best new artist. And, you've got Beyonce or Adele or Taylor or Harry Styles or John Baptiste or whoever it might be, right? But the afternoon show, those are the people I know. You know what I mean? Those are my board members. One of my board members, Nicole Zaratis, won Best Jazz Vocal Album last year, and there she is on stage thanking the New York chapter. So it's like I like that just as much, because whether I know the person who won Best Art Direction, somebody does, because they're all so associated with the chapters. And that's a lot of fun. And the performances, like Leve performed at the premiere ceremony last year, and she's one of my favorite artists right now, and her voice is just so perfect. I can listen to her forever. So yeah, it's just a fun day. It's an exhausting week because there's so many events that happen, from say Wednesday through Sunday, which Sunday obviously is the telecast. So it's really tiring, but this is a privilege to be that tired doing those things, you know?
What is your
So,
favorite thing about your position there?
oh goodness, there's a lot, you know, I don't know if I have one favorite thing. I, I, I really love helping members when they need help when it comes to directing them to music cares or helping them submit their music for awards consideration, or they need help with membership, or they want to be connected with someone. Like I just feel like I'm a connector. Like that's part of my job. I connect. Um, I love working with the industry in New York, which my department is called Membership and Industry Relations. And I come from the industry, so I know these people and I've known them for decades, some of them, and I talk the same language and I understand what their highs and their lows, you know, I've been there myself. I love music discovery. And if it wasn't for this job, there are so many of my favorite artists right now that I would probably not know about or appreciate, even if it's not a genre that I would like normally go to. You know what I mean? Like if I didn't have this job, I wouldn't know about Leve, and I just adore her. I wouldn't
Hmm.
know about Liana Flores, or I wouldn't know about Angelica Garcia, or I wouldn't know about Blunt, or even St. Vincent for that matter. Like they're just artists that people say, hey, you know, listen to this. And I'm like, okay. And some of it is like, yeah, really good. Appreciate what they're trying to do here. Or like, oh my God, I've got to go to that show. You know, it's like, and that's the other thing. I love live music, and live music is one of the greatest uplifting, soul stirring moments that you can have. For that hour and a half, you are one with that artist and those 500 people, 100 people, 10,000 people, whatever. You're all there for the same reason, and there's nothing more uplifting than that. Like I said, I go to 2 or 3 concerts a week generally. So
Amazing.
next
That's
week
amazing.
is Gabby Moreno, and then what's the Warning, which are unbelievable rock band from Monterrey, Mexico, 3 sisters, and they have been playing together since they're like 5 years old, and I've been following them on social media for years because their cover of Metallica's Enter Sandman just erupted, like went viral, went crazy. And they're so unbelievably talented. And, you know, it's like I'm a big supporter of rock, you know, and in the 80s, rock was, you know, the big genre. It's not as big anymore as it once was. But it's still, to me, like it's so important to support rock because you know, it's just three
Yes.
young women on stage, you know, it's like, holy cow, that's like the greatest thing. So,
What's the biggest challenge in your role?
um, you know, honestly and truly, it's keeping up with everything and keeping focused. Um, I always like to think that because I've been doing this for so long that I have perspective, right? But and perseverance, I suppose. But you know, this isn't the record industry that I entered. This is much more complicated. And whether the internet was a blessing or a curse or both, depending on what day of the week, it's added so much good and bad to everything, right? We wouldn't be talking right now if we didn't have the
Right.
internet, right? But I think for me, just kind of being older is just staying on top of everything because um, there's just so much. And, you know, we are a big chapter and we're New York, and, you know, we have a gigantic relationship with the UN, and they're here, and the industry is here, and every band comes through New York and we see them, or they come to the office building, or besides the initiatives that we want to do locally that my staff and I want to do and produce, we have the national initiatives also. So the calendar is just crazy. And so it's just a matter of staying focused and just keeping up. I mean, again, this is my 40. I graduated college in 1982, so this is my 42nd year in the music business. But and I still am very happy that I still have the energy and the excitement. And I hope it lasts, for as
You
long
definitely
as it
do.
can.
The passion comes through the Zoom screen over here.
Oh,
That
thank
is for
you.
sure.
Yeah. And
Without a doubt.
I'm very fortunate. I got a job that um, is so perfect for what I've learned over the years. And everything that I've learned over the years is incorporated into what I do every day. Um, and it's just, I'm truly, truly blessed to have this job and work for this company. Um, and I will be, I will be here as long as they'll have me. Let's put it that way.
That's yes, and obviously, I mean, you have so much experience and so much to share, and you can just roll off names of groups and artists, and it's incredible to me. It's a beautiful thing. I did want to bring up something. I mean, as you
Yeah.
know, I'm the CEO of a nonprofit organization that funds kids to take ongoing lessons in the arts. And I think, the reason I pose this question is because I don't think that a lot of people who are not involved in the arts understand what the arts provides to someone when they are a part of it and how it makes them feel. And, for organizations that are in the arts that are nonprofits that struggle with fundraising, because we do it, because we're not feeding the hungry, and we're not housing the homeless, but the music, what it gives to people is just incredible. And what do you, just in a couple words here, what do you share about that connection? You talked about 10,000 people all being on that same journey. If what do you hope others would hear or understand better about the arts and what it can bring to a child, an adult? It
Oh,
doesn't matter.
well, I think what I would love in a perfect world is that um, as much as focused on the arts as focused on sports. I would not want to take one nickel away from any sports program. Um, but it's always the arts that tend to be cut. And I'm not saying that sports programs don't get cut either,
Right.
because they certainly do. But it's for me, arts and I when I say I mean it all. I mean whether it's literature, whether it's music, whether it's
Mhm.
going to a museum and seeing an Edward Hopper hanging on the wall, whatever it might be. Um, it's it's reassuring that you see someone creating something out of nothing, right? Because the Sistine Chapel was just bricks at one time. That
Mhm.
ceiling was just stone. The Michelangelo was one big block of marble, right? That record that you dropped the needle on, the content on that record did not exist at all before that person created it. And it's so was I don't have that talent, right? I can't sing or write music or paint. I read endlessly, so but I can't write the great American novel. Um, but you're just so appreciative of those people that could do that because again, they are putting everything, every ounce of their energy, their spirit, their soul into that painting, book, record, whatever it is, sculpture, and to take that away from students as young as kindergarten through high school, whatever,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
is 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 the great tragedy of this country. And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not
Right.
saying it's your fault or their fault, but the fact that we can all know is that it is happening. Um, and we do a lot of programs where
Mhm.
we go to schools and teach classes. We're doing a big program in November at the Cecily Tyson School in the Oranges.
Mhm.
It's an 800 student performing arts high school, and we're doing a Grammy in the Schools day with multiple programmings from like how to produce a Broadway show to how to record strings. to how to mix remotely, how to run a record company, like all that kind of stuff for all of these students from, middle and high school students. We're going to have an artist perform, we're going to have a student performance, and we're going to try and do this like every year. We did it last fall in Connecticut. We had 5 high schools come into the University of Hartford, and we did it at the University of Hartford. But yeah, that's a very big initiative for the Recording Academy and through the Grammy Museum. So the Grammy Museum Educational Division, does all of that. We work also very closely with, in New York anyway, with Carnegie Hall, because they have artists in residence and teaching artists, and we've done things with sending professionals to talk to incarcerated youth, all kinds of programs. And it's really, really important. And I mean, I remember when I was in St. Mary's and had a violin lesson forced upon me, and I'm like, oh God. And I wish I knew how to play violin, even if I could just play Smoke on the Water and violin, which is like, the first song everybody learns on guitar, right? I mean, I know that there's, and we all know that there is science behind childhood development when they are, open to arts programs, everything from finger painting to Play-Doh, whatever it might be. Being able to create is a gift that we really should cherish, and we don't cherish it, I think, like maybe we should. But this is just my opinion. It's no one else's.
I second that.
Yeah, it's crucial. As I've seen even my daughters perform, and what it means to them to do that and do that successfully, and have parents that support that. But listen, if my kids wanted to play baseball, I would support that too. It doesn't. I love baseball, so that was an easy one. But it's really important to support whatever the child wants when it comes to that. It just always seems like it's the arts that get cut before anything else. But sports gets cut also, in some places too. So I don't want to say one is more important than the other, because listen, a child learns a lot through sports too. They learn teamwork and discipline and rules and regulations, and that kind of, when they grow up with that, that's another important skill set. Like at the end of the day, we all have rules and regulations that we have to follow because we're a civilized society. And believing in a sports team makes you part of something bigger that you have no control over, and it's like you're in that room with a punk rock band with those 100 people, or you're in a stadium with 55,000 people praying that the guy, shuts out the team in the bottom of the ninth. It's like everybody's there for the same reason. It's the same spirit,
Nick, I could talk to you for hours. There's so many other questions I didn't get to, so I definitely want to have you on again.
Maybe we'll have a part 2. Yeah,
we have to have a part 2, because there's just so many things I didn't get to, and I'm so grateful that I met you, and just like you, I didn't think I'd ever be sitting in this chair interviewing somebody like you, and how our path just kind of, as you said before, as you have to believe in yourself, you have to have determination, and and listen to the signs. Mentorship is what I always say is important. And believing that you can get there.
Students are listening too. The other thing, and I tell everyone that, even when my daughters were in college and I went to like career day and everything, do internships. I got my first job directly from my internship. And I think about like, oh, imagine if I didn't do that internship. Like, like you don't know where you would have ended up, right? Or if I didn't lose my job in Philadelphia, how long would I have stayed there? And would I have lost that spot in New York? It's like, my wife likes to say that if it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. I don't know if I want to be that cavalier about it, but it's a certain truth to it. You just gotta know what you're up against. You got to know what the subject matter is, right? Whatever it is. If you're a student and you want to go into performing arts, or if you want to go into the industry, because, you can't have one without the other, right?
Right.
So, the industry jobs are, they're not the same jobs that when I came in.
Right.
People aren't coming in through college radio like they might have in 82, whatever, God, it's so long ago.
No, don't even talk about it. I don't even
So
want to
long
think about how many
ago.
years.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you the last question I've been
Yeah.
asking everybody this season on the podcast, and that is, what is the legacy that you hope to leave behind?
Oh, geez. Oh my God. That is quite a word, legacy. Ah, oh man, we might have to answer that in part 2. I think, um, I think that, from my job standpoint, I guess I would like to think that I left the New York chapter in a better place than when I got here. And whatever that means, right?
Mhm.
And obviously, for my family, I just want them to know that I did everything I could for them and love them dearly, whatever, till they throw dirt on me, right? I think I'm sure I could think more about that and probably come up with a more coherent answer. But yeah, I'd like to think that, the New York chapter, whether I'm here for 5 more years or 7 more years or 10 more years, whatever it is in a better place than when I started. And not just from like a numbers standpoint. Well, when you started, there were 2,000 members and now there's 4. That's not our job. Our job is not based on a quota. You know what I mean? From a membership standpoint, we want the best people that want to be part of the organization, because you don't have to be a member of the Recording Academy to be nominated for a Grammy or to win a Grammy. All of the stuff that I talked about that we do day to day here, those are the other 364 days of the year. And then we have Grammy Sunday, which is what everybody knows, but there's
Right.
so much more that goes into it.
I just want to thank you for a
Thank you,
fabulous
Jody.
interview.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, really.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for all this wonderful information and sharing about people that, we've got lots of people who are fans of a lot of the people that you just mentioned. And, they're probably very excited to hear, about the work and how it impacts how the records get to where they were getting and back then in the 80s, and how you worked through coming from being, again, I think it's just an incredible story. Being at that college radio station to where you are now
Yeah.
is such a beautiful, beautiful journey. So
Thank
I'm going
you.
to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what steps, small or large, are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Again, Nick Cucci, I'm so thrilled to know you, and I'm so grateful that you were able to do this interview with me today.
Thanks, Jody. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.